Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ryan Ride Mechanic channel. How's everyone doing today? I was sent an email this past week and I wanted to go over the topic. So I want to talk about bounce over at Oakwood Park. So let's get into it.
Now get ready. Here we go.
First of all, if this is your first time here, make sure you like and subscribe, do all that normal stuff downstairs. It really does help out the channel and I do appreciate it. Alright, so over at Oakwood Amusement Park, their ride Bounce had some sort of an issue. Honestly, no one knows what it is yet because it's just happened, but the park seemed to be getting a lot of negative press about it. So a viewer sent me an email and they said, hey, have a quick question for you. There is a Huss shot and drop tower at Oakwood Theme Park in Wales, which has recently been reported to have some sort of incident. The park today has posted a video of what happened due to the media coverage of it being misleading, according to them, but I was wondering what your opinions were. Here's a link to the video the park posted. Okay, so first, I followed the link and got the park's official statement, and here is their official statement. So the park's official statement is, over the past 48 hours, we have received an unprecedented level of interest, reporting and criticism following an estop activation on our ride Bounce on Wednesday afternoon. And this was put out the 12th of July, so that was Friday. Whilst we recognize we cannot control what is reported in the media or said in social media, there has been misprinting and many inaccuracies written over the last few days. Everyone on this channel, we all understand how that happens, right? We all know things get blown out of proportion really easily. We understand that the theme park always attracts a high level of interest, however, we also believe the importance of correct reporting. That's great. We have therefore made the decision to publish footage of Wednesday's bounce occurrence on our website to provide context and clarity. That's awesome. They cut it off at the pass. They said instead of everyone going out trying to find footage that might have been doctored or anything else, they simply said, here is the footage. This is what happened. We continue to provide a fun day for our families and young people and look forward to welcoming visitors to Oakwood Theme Park over the forthcoming summer holidays. Well, that's great. That is a great response from the park. That is awesome. So I watched this video several times. So here's the video. We will watch it once straight through and then we'll see what happens from there. Okay, so it's done its first thing and it's going up to do its drop sequence now. It's lifting the riders all the way up to the top. Okay, seems to have reached its max height. Now it's paused. The initial drop return was complete as expected. Then let's see here. Starts to come back down. And then accelerates into its drop sequence here. And there's the first bounce. It goes back up. Passes the pulley. And then comes back down really far, really hard bounce, and then e-stop is hit right there. E-stop occurs right there. Working with ride control. Okay. So when it came down that second time, it came way back down past this guy here. Can I move this? Yeah. Came way past down that and came all the way back down to where the shock absorbers are down there on the bottom. The shock absorbers on these rides, they're not meant to, any tower ride really, they're not meant to like catch or prevent a gondola from bouncing or anything like that. They are there when the gondola comes back down at the end of the cycle and it has to come down and sit down on its platform the rest of the way. That is when it's meant to start absorbing that shock. So the system doesn't have to try to go into a lower step, lower step, lower step, and gently set down. The shock absorbers do that for it. Okay, so let's look at this another time. pause it and go up. Drop tower ride bounce, experience an emergency stop, estop procedure during guest operation. Okay, so as we go up, we see what the ride is constructed like. Let me see if we can run this down here. So you have your passenger vehicle sitting right here, and then behind it is several air cylinders inside the tower, and then in the middle of the tower there is this large ram that's sitting there, and in the center there is a giant cylinder. So basically what the whole ride is it's a giant pneumatic air cylinder. And if we let it keep going, you can see right here up towards the top, you see the ram is connected to a set of pulleys, and the pulleys are pulling on these cables. These cables are attached to one side, and then they crisscross each other and come back down and attach to the ride vehicle right here. This is where the pulley attaches, or the cable attaches one side, and it also attaches kitty corner the other side. Ride only uses two cables. And as you see, as it goes up, it continues to pass this pulley on the way back down. And then up towards the top, the sheaves are right up on top up there. You could see them as the cables pass over. So then it pauses up there, waits for a while. Initial drop is returned completely as expected. And then it starts to lower down. And then you can see the pulleys coming back up right here. The ram's extending, and it comes down really hard. I'll pause this just so I can read. Travel into the shock absorbers, which are placed for instance where ride travels lower. Okay. So it comes back down, does the one bounce like it's supposed to. There it goes, it comes up just like it's supposed to, and then it comes back down. Before this, the shock absorbers pushed the ride back upwards, and estop procedure was activated with the passenger gondola coming to rest, and the ride brakes as expected. Okay. So it's come up, it's gone back down, and it's bounced really far down there. Now, if we take this guy and inch it backwards, let's see how close these people actually get to the ground. Now, if you look down there, it's like, whew, that was pretty close. Can I move it back just a hair? They came really close to the ground. The fact that they said, "Oh, the shock absorbers pushed it back up," it's like, I could see the part making some sort of a statement like that. Honestly, not knowing the intent of how these Huss rides were built, not too sure about it. But like I said before, typically shock absorbers at the base of tower rides are there for landing the gondola back on the ground once it comes down from the end of its cycle. They're typically not to repel. They're not there to act as a spring. So let's look at what this ride normally looks like. We'll head to YouTube, and I'll just use this video here. Lifting up, going up, 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 up. Now, one thing I already don't like about this, so I'll rewind it just a little bit, is listen to how much air is bypassing inside this thing. So typically when these rides go up, you have air changing sides. Air has to be pushed into one side. In this case, the cylinder's coming down. So they pushed air into the top side of the ram to retract the cylinder. And then in the bottom side of the ram, the air is going out. It's typically a controlled rate. You would only hear air escaping from the bottom side of the cylinder as it's coming back down, and not a lot of volume. But if you listen to it, you can hear air flooding into the cylinders. But once it comes up to a stop right there, and it's paused, you hear that air that's still going? That's air that's bypassing. Somewhere in the ride, that air is bypassing, leaking inside something. It could be a valve, could be inside the cylinder. Rides, I don't think, should be that noisy. So let's watch this cycle. Here it comes back down, then it gets into its drop sequence. A nice bounce. Okay, so as it comes down the second time, you can hear the air flood back into the cylinders again for that raising up. And I'm assuming this assembly here on the side of the tower, I'm assuming that's the brake assembly that they were talking about. Listen to it. Air gets injected into the bounce, and it flies back up there. And then air gets injected again right there. And it's a little more air because it pushes the gondola higher up. So what's the air getting injected into the cylinder for? Well, that is the bounce. That's the bounce they're talking about. Because at any point in time on one of those air cylinders, you can always cap one side and get it to bounce by itself, but it doesn't do that much. Here, I went out and got an air cylinder from the garage because I have some of these sitting around. This is an old air cylinder. It's double acting, which means you push air into this side of the cylinder, right here, that hole, and the piston extends. You push air into this side, and it pushes it back down the other way. So it's dual acting. It can go both ways. So at any point in time, let's see, with this guy, with the cylinder extended all the way up, like that, that is, the cables are at their least amount of slack, so the gondola is all the way down at the ground. So what they do is they put air in the top and push this guy all the way down until the gondola is all the way up at the very top of the thing, and then it waits there, and then it seems like what they do is they start letting air pressure out. And then they let pressure out of that hole while they're not putting anything into this hole. And they simply just let it out, and it starts to creep up, 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 and then once it gets past a certain point, they start pushing air into this hole right here, and it gives it that burst down. Now, before it gets to the bottom, what they do is they simply cap this hole right here, and then it locks the cylinder. So if I do that again, see how that works? Put my finger over the cylinder. It acts kind of like a spring right there. But I'm capping the hole. So as it goes back up towards the top, all you have to do is cap it, and it stops the cylinder. But then at the same time, what they do is they inject air back into that. So it doesn't just get its little bit of a bounce right there. They bring it back up. Then they inject air into that top one, and it pushes it back down, which causes the gondola to go back up. So it was at its, let's see, it was at its very top, and then it started coming down, and then they said, okay, it reached its point where it needs to bounce. Now, how do ride manufacturers do that? There's lots of different ways to do this. There's a ton of different ways to do this, so I can only speculate what Huss does, but I'll go off of some other examples that I've seen before, which is typically you use magnetic reed switches on the side of the cylinder because the piston on the inside essentially has a magnetic ring around it, and then you put a little sensor right on the outside of the thing, and when that magnet passes by, it turns a sensor on and tells the ride that it's to a certain position. So that's one way. Another way is to use just regular proximity sensors all up and down the tower on two sides. That way it knows where the gondola is at all times. So it says, okay, it's come down, so it's at its max, it's gone through its drop sequence, so it went up, and then they capped that hole, and then pushed air back inside, which started the bounce. And it went, okay, and it went back up there, and then it said, all right, let the air out again of this side, and then it started to go back up. But instead of capping it on this side, creating that bounce again, for some reason that didn't work. Now, there's a couple of things that could have hindered that, but basically the most I could think of is a valve that has gone bad. So either what happened is when they interrupted this guy in his drop sequence, so the cylinder's on the way up. Now, if the one that was letting air come out never closed, if it just stayed open, they would have capped this side off at the bottom, which I could do the same thing if you watch. See, it's like I could hold my thumb over that bottom port and it does the same thing. So they could have had something like this valve up here didn't close to create some of the cushion, and this valve down here stayed open. Maybe they injected too much air. Maybe it simply just didn't inject the air for the cushion it was supposed to. Either way, what happened was it kept going higher and higher up until it reached its lower limit switch down there, and it said, uh-oh, too low. Now the brakes are there mainly for if the gondola were to, for some reason, fall. If the ride goes into that estop condition, those brakes would engage. What type of brakes are they? Honestly, I don't know what type of brakes they are. Can't really see it that well from some of these videos. But I would have to imagine they're pinch brakes of some sort. It could be magnetic, but I doubt it, because the gondola goes down that far, so you'd want something unrestrictive. It's not quite a drop ride. So you want something that's off and on. So once it went down and hit that very far low limit point and said, oh crap, stop, the brakes locked up, and that was already on its rebound. So it already came down and hit that max extent, almost max extent up at the top, and started to bounce back up. But because it had already hit that low limit, which would have been on the tower, on the ride somewhere other than these cylinders, it would have hit a low limit in one of those other shock absorbers, and it would have said, crap, stop. And then it would have locked up the air in, would have locked up the air out. It would have capped both sides of the cylinder just to lock the cylinder where it was. And then the brakes on the ride itself, honestly, whatever they are, not sure, those brakes would have also engaged to hold the gondola. Or in a lot of manufacturers, when they engineer these things, they more think about the cables breaking. So on a tower ride, if you were to break the cable, although we've seen bad things happen like that, but the whole gondola would land in the magnetic brakes at the bottom of the tower ride. So you would stop it from simply plummeting to the ground. But on a ride like this, where it has to bounce close to the ground, well, it's supposed to be down there to start with. So they need an alternate safety system to monitor that the gondola is where it's supposed to be at the time it's supposed to be. Now, this timing with the valves pushing air in and out of this cylinder to get it to do the bounce function, this timing could have simply be done by proximity sensors along the cylinders, along the towers. It could also have been done with timers. Not so much likely with timers, simply because the weight of the gondola affects the ride structure up and down. So I don't think it's being done with timers. I think it's more than likely being done with proximity sensors along the cylinder in the center of the ride, or proximity sensors along the tower, which actually measure the cab or gondola on the outside of the ride. And then the last component of this is that because it's using the pulley on top with the two sets of cables going through, your movement on this guy is magnified. So right here, if I were to look at this cylinder, the way it sits, I say I only have, that's only about 90 millimeters worth of travel, that's it. But if I take a cable and run it around a pulley and back up and down to the other side, my 90 millimeters becomes 180 on the other side, because I've given it a different route to go through. If you wanted to route the pulleys around twice, you can get that to go even more and even more. So it's like, why do we care about cable, distance, and travel? Well, at some point in time, these movements become very critical when you move these cylinders just a little bit, that's a lot of movement out there. So where it could have monitoring sensors all up and down the cylinder, basically as soon as it gets just a little off, and that sensor says, nope, I'm in the wrong position, it's way off on the gondola because it's twice, 2.5, 3. I don't know what their actual pulley setup is on this ride, but it could be multiplied much worse than they normally think it is. So with all that being said, let's watch the original video again. Lifting up. There's the pulley right there in the center, coming back down. And that pulley in the center, that's also the reason why, if you look at this, the cylinders all stop right down here at the bottom of the screen. But the cylinders are only about half the distance of the ride, because the other half the distance, that cable being around that pulley, it makes up for the full travel of the entire ride. Go up there, it's pausing, it's going to wait. I've got no audio for this particular video. And then it's going to start to come back out. They're bleeding off the pressure, they're bleeding it off. Pressure is down to an acceptable range, so they open the valves up and let it either go into a free fall or it's assisted with air pressure on the other side. Then they close it, inject air back in, it comes up, and it goes down for its bounce again, but I think for some reason it doesn't close, or it closes late. And instead of injecting the air back into the cylinder to get it that second shot, it basically just closed the cylinder to get the little bit of a bounce out of it, and then it didn't shoot it back up, but because that air in acts as part of the recoil, it went too far. So kind of looking at it, it's like, kind of looks like it missed the second injection of air, which means the valve didn't open. So if that's the case, what's really cool about this is that if that's the case, then the ride did exactly what it was supposed to do, right? We don't have a problem here. No one was injured on the ride that I know of. It didn't say anything about people being injured on there, but it let the gondola come down pretty far, and then it suddenly locked the system up and said, nope, I'm out of position, and it sent the ride into an estop. Okay, and that's what these rides are supposed to do. No one was hurt. Even the ride wasn't even damaged, so extra bonus, right? So I have a feeling in there they simply just had a valve go bad. Now, I've worked on a Zamperla, which they're, what are they called? I think it's a jump and jack. It's basically a similar type ride that uses an air cylinder, 2 air cylinders, the same exact thing. It uses cables up over the top and routes back down to the little gondola. And it does the same thing. It uses 4 valves, 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom. And each one has an inlet and an exhaust side to it. So it moves the gondola up, and actually this would be down again, same exact principle. So while it's moving the gondola down, or letting it down, I should say, it's injecting air into the top side and releasing air out of the bottom side. The bounce here. So with the cylinder retracted all the way down, the gondola would be up at the very top. And then as they let it go into its drop sequence, which those are supposed to go up and down a couple times, and then stop. So as they let it go into its drop sequence, they're pushing air into the bottom to extend this up to do its drop. They're also using a valve to let air out of the top. And then as soon as it goes into its bounce, they instantly stop and then reverse the 2 and start them. So when it goes down to a point where it says, okay, I'm down low enough, they go, all right, and then go back here, and then push air back into this guy up on top to start bringing the cylinder back in and start releasing air out of that side. And if any of those valves malfunction, you get a very funky or spongy sequence out of it because one of the valves is malfunctioning. Let's say it goes to put air in the bottom to extend the cylinder up. This would be to go down in that case. But my exhaust valve is broken up here. So it would put air into the bottom and start to push it up, and it would just kind of stick there. and it might get spongy a little bit, but it's just kind of going to sit there because it's missing a way to let the air escape from the top. It's like, okay, and vice versa. It could go from the full top position, which would be the gondolas, down, and start putting air back into there, start raising it back up. But if this exhaust down here were broken, it would just not be able to lift it. So the gondola, again, would just kind of stick in the center. One of the reasons on those particular rides, they have, each one has a set of bleed valves on them, because that was it. If any of the valves malfunctioned, the gondola was stuck on the tower somewhere. So maintenance simply just went out there and just gently opened up the bleed valves and let the air pressure out of the cylinder, and the thing would naturally, gravity would let it bring itself back down, and then it would sit back down at the bottom. No big deal. You know, one more thing that could have happened, but you wouldn't really be able to know unless you had the audio to this video, would be is if the top seal broke. So on these cylinders, like I said, this is, the cab would be fully down, fully up. So we would want it to bounce right about here is when we'd start capping it, and then we'd flood the top side with air to push it back down to go up again. So if the top seal on this guy, which sits right down and seals this shaft right here, if that top seal were to go bad and break all of a sudden and just start letting a bunch of air out, you might have the same thing. But on that video, you would hear, like right when it goes to do that bounce that second time, you would hear a really loud air rush come out. Just right when that thing injects that air inside of that, instead of hearing a hiss in the background, which is just the volume of air flooding into the cylinder, you would hear it would sound really loud coming out of the top of there, because it essentially blew the seal out of the top of the cylinder. Not impossible, but it is possible, but really can't say that unless you had the audio to this. So I thought this was an interesting video, so I really wanted to put my 2 cents on what I think was happening here. I've honestly never seen one of these Huss rides before, but it looks interesting. Still prefer the S&S ride over it, though. I mean, this looks well and good, but I would think that the maintenance on that center cylinder up there would be an absolute nightmare. Like, that would not be fun to do, working on that big cylinder in the middle of that thing. Anyways, just want to do this quick video. Let me know what you think. Have you ever been on one of these rides before? There's a handful of them out there. Maybe someone that goes to the Oakwood theme park. Let me know what type of brakes are on there. I'm really curious to see on those 2 sides. It's like, what type of brakes do they have on that ride? I could see them being some sort of a pinch brake, but the videos I was able to find didn't have a good view of that. Alright, well, I think that's done it for this video. I'm Ryan the Ride Mechanic. Make sure you like, subscribe, do all that stuff. And as always, stay off the air gates. Bye.